So if you guys would look at James chapter 1, verse number 13, it says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death." So, a lot of times when we start off as a lust and just something kind of in our mind, something that we don't necessarily act out on, a lot of times if we allow that to keep dwelling in our mind, it will eventually bring forth death and cause a lot of death. But the starting point of a lot of sin is going to start off with lust, which obviously lust, you can say, is a sin, right? But you're not really acting out on it. So I'm going to use, as we go through here, lust, sin, and death as different categories. But you could say lust is a sin, but I'm referring to it kind of acting out on it as a sin versed in your mind. But I got an AI overview of things that people lust after. This is how I got the outline of the sermon from AI. It says people can lust after things like power, money, fame, attraction, luxury items, forbidden things, food, or even experiences. Essentially anything that invokes a strong, intense desire or craving. So those are a lot of things we think about, right? Power, money, fame is kind of the big ones. The forbidden fruit, also kind of things that are off limits to you, always seem better that you can't have, right? When you don't have any money, a steak sounds good. So if you guys would flip over to James chapter 4. So in James chapter 4, verse number 1, it says, "From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lust, that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not." So we see here lust and killing and wars and just obtaining things is all correlated, but it always starts with that lust. So the first thing that people have a lot of times when they do big sins is that lust at first, that desire to have something, and they want it so much that it just keeps dwelling in them until they act on it. And a lot of times it will lead to wars and death and killing people for these things. So the first example I have is that forbidden things is what AI said, but the forbidden fruit, if you guys would turn to Genesis chapter 2. So obviously this is a famous story, but I kind of like looking at things in the Bible and trying to put myself in that situation, because a lot of times you can look at things in the Bible and just read it as a story and just kind of gloss over it, but it's nice to read a story and kind of picture yourself in that situation and what would we do and different things that might apply to our life. So in Genesis chapter 2, verse number 15, it says, "And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge and good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." So, it's pretty simple, right? They can eat of everything in the garden. They pretty much have no laws, no rules. I mean, you see all the laws we have in America or in Indiana are municipal laws, and it's you couldn't even read it if you spent your whole life reading it, just stacks and stacks of laws. But they have one, right? So it should be pretty easy to follow. This is pretty libertarian, But obviously, we're not going to read the whole story, but in Genesis 3:4, the serpent tries to deceive Eve and put some doubt on what God said. And in Genesis 3:4, it says, "The serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die." And in verse number 6 says, "And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat." So we see here that, hey, they didn't have many laws, there's just one, but Satan, the serpent, right, as it's called here, that they put some doubt in Eve's mind of saying, hey, this tree is a good tree to eat, right? Once you look at it, you're not going to surely die. And obviously they didn't die right away, but you don't have to turn there, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 22, it says, "For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive." So just because of this one sin of eating this fruit, which kind of is, I've said before, just a small little sin, right? Eating a fruit that you're not supposed to. You wouldn't think of that as like the biggest sin. But because of that, every single person that ever lived after that, including themselves, died. So, she started off with that lust of just looking at the tree. The serpent lied and said, "You're not going to die." And, eventually she is going to die because of that. But then the sin of eating the fruit when God said not to, but then it leads to that death, that every single person that ever lives after that is going to die and, also deserve hell because of this one sin. And it says in Romans 5:12, now to turn there, it says, "Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." So, the forbidden fruit thing is a major one, right? Because every single person here, we all are going to die physically one day. And obviously, hopefully everybody in here is saved, so we're not going to die spiritually. But, even that physical death isn't going to be fun. And it's all because of that one sin of the forbidden fruit, right? So that's kind of an easy one. I'm sure most of you heard that story a million times. So we'll skip to the next one. It's fame. Obviously, this is a big one in today's society, right? With TikTok and the podcast and the TV shows and all the media that we have, the Facebook and the Instagram. It's easy to try to be famous somewhere, whereas maybe in the past, before TV, it's a little harder to be famous because, you couldn't really contact people. But now everybody can try to be famous. So I have a survey I want to read here. It says, according to various surveys, a significant portion of people, particularly younger generations, express a desire for fame, with some polls indicating that around 1/3 of millennials would consider giving up their job to achieve it, while a broader survey suggests roughly half of adults wouldn't mind a degree of fame. However, achieving true widespread fame is statistically very rare. So it's obviously very rare to get it, but half of people want more fame, and a lot of people want to be famous. So obviously we know more and more is coming out that fame, leading to fame, can actually cause a lot of damage. You see the Diddy, the Epstein, the crazy stuff that they do. So fame isn't all it's cracked up to be. But there's a good example of the Bible, somebody who really wanted fame. It's King Saul. So if you'd flip over to 1 Samuel chapter 18. So King Saul wants fame pretty bad. And we're going to read a story that's kind of crazy when I was thinking about it, of just like how bad Saul's life got for like just the smallest little thing. And in 1 Samuel 18, look at verse number 6. It says, "And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the woman came out of the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music." So we see here that, hey, these women are coming out, and they're going to greet King Saul. They're dancing. So it starts off pretty good. I mean, Saul is getting some fame. He should be happy, right? In verse number 7, it says, "And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands." So they're bragging up Saul. But here's where it gets bad. It says, "And David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, but unto me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forever." So it's pretty crazy that, women are coming out, they're pumping up Saul and boosting him. He's happy, but then once they boost up David just a little more, that Saul just gets so mad. I mean, to say, "And what can he have more but the kingdom?" just for that. I mean, it's kind of like, stop being a baby, right? I mean, it's just such a little tiny thing. And to think that Saul and David had a really good relationship. David's playing music for him. David, is doing all this stuff for Saul in the war, a great warrior, killing Goliath, doing all these great things for King Saul. And Saul let something that David doesn't even do, because David did nothing wrong. I mean, David didn't say anything, but just some outside influence to say something to just ruin that relationship. That'd be like I go out soul winning with Andrew, and then we come back, and then, Brother Stephen says, oh, Andrew got saved, 100 people, and Brett only got 10. It's like, who cares, right? I mean, it's not a big deal if people, especially, it's probably not even true that David killed 10,000 and Saul killed, just 1,000, but, he lets it get to him. And it's like, who cares, especially if something's not true? Just don't let it dwell on you. But we're going to see in verse number 11 of what something so small and silly is going to lead to. It says, and Saul cast the javelin, and he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. So we see here that Saul's trying to actually kill David for something that he didn't do twice with a javelin. And in verse number 12 it says, and Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and departed from Saul. So, here we see that the Lord's departed from Saul, and obviously lots of reasons for that of what Saul was doing and just going on this dark path. And if you'd flip over to 1 Samuel 22, we're going to see this dark path just continue to get worse. So obviously right now Saul has just attempted murder on David, but we're going to see that Saul is going to commit physical murder here in 1 Samuel 22, verse number 17. It says, and the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me, but the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, turn thou and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and suckling, and oxen and asses and sheep, with the edge of the sword. So we see that Saul, because of something that David didn't even say, David didn't even do anything wrong, he just keeps going on this dark path to where he's killing the priests of the Lord, and not only them, but also in verse 19, you see the women, the children, the oxen, the suckling, just killing everything in the city of Nob with the priest, because of some little tiny thing that's not even a big deal. But just in Saul's desire for fame, which is that lust, right? The start in his mind of just desiring this fame. And then you have the sin of the attempted murder, and then also the physical murder of this whole town. And then the same thing with the death, right? You have the death of the whole city of the priests just over a small little lust at the beginning. So if he could have got that lust under control at the start and not just let it, continue to dwell in him, he could have stopped this huge sin in his life that eventually, is it. And obviously all these examples, you can keep going and there's just more death, because obviously you can keep going to Saul's life, and then eventually he's going to commit suicide. His son's going to die. So there's just tons of death associated with it, which obviously we can't say every single example, but, there's just a lot of death associated. So the next big one's going to be money. Obviously, money's a big thing that people lust over, right? And there's an article, or I guess all these are AI answers. I'm an AI guy now. So it says, many Americans say they want more money and believe it would make them happier. However, not everyone views wealth as the highest measure of success. So it says 71% of Americans believe more money would solve most of their problems. 79% of Americans believe they would be happier if they had more money. 69% of Americans say their desire for money influences their daily decisions. So that's crazy that almost 7 out of 10 people let money influence their daily choices, and then almost 80% would say they'd be happier, or believe they'd be happier if they had more money, which obviously, now with inflation, everybody'd be happier, you'd think, but. Obviously money's not going to solve all our problems, and you can never have enough money. You get more money, and then somehow the government takes it all anyway. And a lot of people do a lot of crazy stuff for money, and we're going to see some examples here. You guys can flip over to Luke chapter 12. I'm going to read from 1 Timothy chapter 6. In 1 Timothy 6:9 it says, but they that be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil. For while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So obviously the more money you have, the richer you have, the more temptations you're going to have, because you can do a lot more and you can be involved in a lot more sinful stuff, because obviously sin costs a lot of money. Alcohol, from what a lot of people say, costs a lot of money nowadays. And I know the cigarettes, I see that and I'm like, man, who would buy that? That's crazy. And cigarettes are crazy expensive, or a lot of people go to Vegas, which I'm sure that's crazy now in price. But just a lot of sinful things cost a lot of money. So if you're poor, the one good thing is you can't do most of it. So in Luke chapter 12, we're going to see a story of somebody who you don't necessarily see him do anything wrong with money. I guess it depends if he's drinking alcohol or not. But, he's not necessarily being the craziest person, but we're going to see that his desire for just storing money is going to cause him to die. In Luke chapter 12, verse number 16, it says, "And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, because I have no more room to bestow my fruits? And he said, This will I do, I will put down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say unto my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall these things be which thou hast provided?" So he's here, this guy, obviously he's lusting about just wanting to save money, right? And, he just wants to eat, drink, and be merry, which obviously you're supposed to work, do hard work for God. You're supposed to labor. So, it doesn't say anything about that in there. So, at least the sin of being lazy. And then the death is that he's going to die. So obviously, I don't think there's anything wrong with saving money and trying to get ahead. And obviously nowadays you got to save a lot of money if you want to buy a house or buy a car. Like, everything's insane. But, you should always try to keep church, keep God a number one priority. And, if you have a good reason to save money, then I think it's a good thing, right? If you want to save money to go on a mission trip, if you want to save money to, a lot of people are in the Philippines for long extended times, and obviously it's going to cost a lot of money to be there. So you have to save money to go, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're trying to save money like most people, it's, I'm going to save all this money in a 401k so I can do nothing for the rest of my life and just golf and just whatever. I think that's a very dangerous place to be in, because at that point, what does God need you here for, right? If, you're just not going to do anything for God when you retire, and you're just going to save all this money to stay home, God might take you home because there's no reason for you to be here. So, so one more example with money, since this is a big one. If you guys would flip over to Acts chapter 5. So Acts chapter 5, we're going to see a story of people who lie about, what they give to church, lie about their finances, and is actually a crazy story. In Acts chapter 5, I think it's verse number 1. It says, "But a certain man named Ananias with Sapphira his wife sold the possession and kept back part of the price, his wife also being privy to it, and and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why hast Satan filled thine heart to lie to the Holy Ghost and to keep back part of the price of the land? Whilst it remained, was it not thine own? And after it was sold, was it not in thine own power? Why hast thou conceived this thing in thine heart? Thou hast not lied unto men, but unto God." And Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and gave up the ghost, and great fear came on all them that heard these things. And in verse number 9 it says, "And then Peter said unto her, How is it that ye have agreed together to tempt the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of them which have buried thy husband are at the door, and shall carry thee out. Then fell she down straightway at his feet, and yielded up the ghost. And the young men came in and found her dead, and carrying her forth, buried her by her husband." So we see here just a crazy story of people who sold some land, and then they give the money to the apostles, but they lie about it. They're trying to make it seem like, they're giving all the money, and they're keeping back some for themselves. And the husband dies, and then the wife comes later, and they ask her, and she says, yeah, it's true, and then she dies, which obviously I'm sure, like it said, it put fear in everybody. But, sometimes, maybe we could lie in a situation and be like, because obviously here they said they could have kept the money, they didn't have to give it to them. So same thing with tithing, right? Like Justin's not gonna, or Pastor Thompson is not gonna go to your house, look at your checks and grab you and get the money and make sure you're giving your 10%, right? And you don't have to say anything either, even if you gave 9%, 8%, didn't give, like whatever. But if you went around and told people, I tithe all the time and I give my 10%, and then you didn't, that's kind of like the same situation here of like, you don't have to do it, no one's gonna check on you, no one's gonna verify it, and you don't have to say anything, but you shouldn't go around and say that you do something and then not do it, because then you're lying in the same situation. And we see all these situations we looked at, they just want more money, they want more wealth, and this last one, they're lying to God, and the death, right? The Ananias and Sapphira, they die, and then also the guy laying up treasures, he dies as well. So, money I think is a good thing, because you need it to do mission trips, to go to church, to put gas in, to do all types of stuff. But obviously, you want to be careful, because there's a lot of things that you can do with money that can cause a lot of damage to your life, and obviously could even end your life if you do something wrong here. So another one's going to be power. That's another one that people really like, right? They always want to have power. They always want to be over top of people. They always want to be higher than everyone else. If you guys would flip over to Esther chapter 3. So in Esther chapter 3, verse number 1, it says, after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were there with him. And in verse number 5 it says, and when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. So we see here a guy, Haman, who's promoted to pretty much second in charge below the king, and he's getting worshipped by everybody in the kingdom, even the princes and everybody. But then there's one guy, Mordecai, that won't bow down to him. So, which obviously seems like such a silly thing, right? Everybody's worshiping you except one guy. Doesn't seem like a big deal. But in verse number 6, and he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So not only does it seem to me as a little thing, but not only does he now want to just kill Mordecai, he wants to kill all the Jews because of one guy that won't worship him. And I'm sure a lot of the other Jews probably, did worship him or would worship him. I don't think that all the Jews wouldn't worship him, but he wants to kill them all anyways because of one guy, which seems crazy, right? To want to kill thousands of people because of one person that did you wrong is just, I can't even fathom it, Sometimes it's hard to even believe the stories, but you're like, man, why? How are people that crazy? And in verse number 9 it says, and Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also, we'll read that verse, but we're going to see here that this guy is going to die. So he wants to kill Mordecai, but he's going to die because Esther is going to do a bunch of stuff to get him to be killed, obviously, if you know the story. But in verse number 9 it says, and Harbona, one of the king's chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good things for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. And in verse number 10, so they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So we see here a guy that Haman, he wanted to kill all the Jews, wanted to just kill everybody because he wouldn't get worshipped. And then, obviously, if you know the story, everything turned around on him, and Esther got him to be put to death instead. So things just completely went south for this guy. This guy went from being the number 2 in command to literally being killed. And not only did he die, but also his family and a bunch of other people. If you look at Esther chapter 9, we're going to see tons of people die because of this one guy that just had an ego problem with power. And in Esther chapter number 9, verse number 5, it says, "Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men." And in verse number 16 it says, "But the other Jews that were in the king's province gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey." So we see here just thousands of people die because of one guy, Haman, that wants to kill one person that won't bow down to him. So just one little lust of power that somebody bow down to you, right? Who cares? And that leads to thousands and thousands of people dying, and just changes the whole empire, right? Just, you have the lust of the power hungry, you have the sin of trying to kill some innocent person, and then the death of Haman, his family. You have the 500 men, then you have another 75,000 men. So it's hard to imagine that just one little power hungry sin of somebody bowing down to you what it can turn into. And it can literally change at this time the whole world, because this guy's pretty much in charge of the world at this time. And another big one is attraction. That's a big one today, right? You have a lot of the advertisements and the TV shows to look at things you shouldn't look at. So if you guys would flip over to 2 Samuel chapter 13. So in 2 Samuel 13, this is obviously another crazy story that King David had in his perfect life going on at this time. So in 2 Samuel 13, verse number 1, it says, "And it came to pass after this that Absalom the son of David had a fair sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon the sister of David, or the son of David, loved her. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her." So we see at the beginning, we had that same thing, right? The lust, right? He's lusting after his half-sister. And at this time, at least he's got some control, right? He says it's hard for him to do anything to her. And, at this point, if he could stop it, it wouldn't have been the end of the world, right? He could have bounced back, no one might even have known, and wouldn't have been the worst thing. But obviously he has a bad friend. So Jonadab gives him terrible advice and leads him down just this crazy bad road. In verse number 14, it says, "Howbeit he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her." So here we see in verse number 14, he forces his half-sister. And in verse number 32, it says, "And Jonadab, the son of Shimei, David's brother, answered and said, Let not my lord suppose that they have slain all the young men, the king's son. For Amnon only is dead, for by the appointment of Absalom, this hath been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar." So we see here that, hey, the lust started with lusting over his half-sister, then, the sin of forcing his half-sister, and then in verse number 32, then you have the death come, right? Then you have Amnon is the only one dead from the king's sons, which obviously, they make it seem like, oh, it's not a big deal. Amnon only is not a big thing. But obviously, for any of your kids to die, I'm sure is a huge thing. So I'm sure King David, his life at this point is probably just turned upside down. And in verse number 33, it says, "Now therefore let not my lord the king take the thing to his heart to think that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon only is dead." But hey, Amnon being dead is obviously a big thing for King David, and I'm sure he did take it to heart, and I'm sure it was a huge thing for him. But it obviously sends him down this huge dark path, which obviously, if you continue to read, it's going to eventually lead to a civil war. King David's going to have to leave the city. He's going to have to fight against his son, and obviously his son's going to end up dying. Joab's going to kill him, right? So, it all started just with this lust, just for his lust for his sister, and then it led to the sin of forcing his sister, and then it's going to lead to that death, right? Amnon's going to die. Later, Absalom dies, and then lots of people are going to follow and attack King David. So, thousands of them are probably going to die. Probably some of David's men are going to die. So just tons of people that really have nothing to do with this whole situation. They're just kind of following one person or the other, trying to keep the nation as a whole, helping David. They're going to die because of this too. And it's just a sad thing of like one person's lust could end up killing just people that literally have nothing to do with it. So, obviously when we lust or do anything, we should think of like, we don't know the unintended consequence. We don't know where it's going to lead to. We don't know what it's going to do. And obviously every single day people act on their lust and ruin their family. People die. People do all types of crazy stuff because of this. So one that's maybe a little less heavy, but that is food. So if you guys would turn to Numbers chapter 11. So I'm going to read Proverbs 25:16. It says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit it." So obviously food is a huge thing in our society. Everywhere you go, there's a restaurant. I mean, you could be anywhere in America and driving down the road, and there's probably some sort of restaurant, fast food somewhere that you can eat at. There's commercials. There's every supermarket. There's food from all over the world. So there's never been probably ever in history a time that food is more accessible, and also that we don't do anything at all as a society. So it's kind of a bad combination. Lots of food, little work. But I have another couple AI statistics for you guys. I'm living in 2025 now, all this AI. So it says in 2025, we all need to always be thinking, I'm reading the wrong thing. It says, according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, the obesity rate in the United States between 2021 and 2022 was 42%. This means that over 1 in 10 adults in the country were classified as obese. And then it says the prime health issues Americans face due to their diet include obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, certain types of cancer, poor bone health, all stemming from diet high in calories, saturated fats, added sugar, sodium, low in fruits and vegetables. And the typical American diet is often considered over-processed with high levels of refined grains, added sugar, unhealthy fats, contributing to excess calories intake and weight gain, and then very little fruit and vegetable consumption. So obviously what we eat is very important, and obviously food is something very easy that people can lust after, and obviously it's something very easy that can kill you, as we can see, right? So in Numbers chapter 11, we're going to see the children of Israel, they're lusting after food. They're not content with the food that God has made for them. And obviously, this might be a little bit different of a scenario, but I think it's kind of the same, right? God made food, and there's certain foods that God made, and then there's certain foods that God didn't make, like a Little Debbie or like, right? So we should be content, especially kids, if the parents make the fruits, the vegetables, the good foods, and then not complaining about the Little Debbies and the Skittles and the Hershey's and all the junk. So we're going to see what happens to the children of Israel when they complain about food. In Numbers chapter 11, verse number 4, it says, "And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. So obviously that's kind of a bad statement when God's given you something and you say, we don't have anything besides this manna. That's kind of a crazy little statement to make. We don't have anything but what God's given us. And in verse number 32, it says, and the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of the place Kibroth-Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted. So you see here a story. They're complaining about what God's given them. They don't like the manna. They want to eat the stuff they had in Egypt. And, God gives it to them. But then it's kind of like, gives it to them, and then it's like, I got you, and then kills you, plagues you. And then they buried, a bunch of the people that lusted over this food. So, obviously, God's not giving us, manna to eat and doesn't tell us exactly, oh, you need to eat this every day. But obviously in a home setting, maybe the husband or maybe the parents say, hey, this is what we're going to eat. And obviously people love to complain about it, right? So obviously my wife doesn't complain when I make her, when I buy food and say, you have to cook this. She's always happy with what I buy. But I complain more with the stuff that she's like, I want to eat this, like this dried fish or like whatever. I'm like, we're not eating that. So obviously, I can learn maybe. I doubt that I'll ever eat it, though. I'll probably always complain about that. But, I should take my own preaching and be content, right? So obviously, jokes aside, like, stay away from always eating junk food and, always eating just fast food and the all-you-can-eat buffet, the Golden Corral, the Chinese buffets. Just obviously, it's fine to eat it once in a while, right? But you go to these places and you're like, you guys need to stop coming here. Like you guys are on the verge of the death portion of, the lust, sin, and death. You guys are getting to that third step. You guys need to go back a little bit. But, be content with the healthy meals. Be content with the good things, and try to, to live a good, healthy life. Because the healthier you are, the better in shape you're going to be, the more you can serve God. Obviously, I've been one of the people that it's kind of hard to even fathom how they even get up and down the stairs to go, but they still do go. But you can tell, like, hey, they can't go that long because it's like, they're way too obese, and you're like, it's good to be in shape. But as you get older, it's harder and harder to stay in shape, right? I'm not even that big, and I'm like, man, I can barely get out of bed some days. So, it's important as you get older to be in that good shape, which obviously my dad is a great example of this. He's in better shape than me, and he's in his 60s. And, he can do anything. He has no problem doing anything. If his car broke down, he could run till the next town, no problem. But, I kind of want to try to get in better shape so I can serve God longer, do more things, and go on big soul-winning marathons and do whatever, because those things take a lot of work. You go to these foreign countries, and it's hot, it's humid, and everybody walks, and it is hard work. And I'm sure when you hit 50, 60, 70 years old, if you're in bad shape and you had a bad diet and you didn't do what you're supposed to do, it's probably nearly impossible to go out soul winning there. So, it's hard when you're 30 years old to think about that stuff down the road, but, when you hit those older ages, if we're still around, you want to be thinking like, hey, I still want to be serving God, and you're not going to serve God if you're, on an oxygen tank in a nursing home, right? It's going to be hard. I mean, you still obviously can, but it's going to be way more limited than if you're still able to run 5 miles, right? And the last one here is going to be luxury items. So if you guys would flip over to 1 Kings chapter 21. So 1 Kings chapter 21, we're going to see a story of a luxury item that the king wants to take from Naboth here. It says in 1 Kings 21, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it, or if it seem good unto thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said unto Ahab, The Lord forbid it me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee." So we see here that the king wants Naboth's vineyard, and Naboth's like, "No, I'm going to keep it." So Ahab, turns kind of into a crybaby about it, and his wife's going to get it for him. So in verse number 9, it says, "And she wrote in the letter, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him, to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him, that he may die." And in verse number 13 it says, "And there came in 2 men, sons of Belial, and sat before him, and the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him with stones, that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead." So we see here the king wants a piece of land, and Naboth doesn't want to give it to him. So, Ahab's lusting over this land. It's close to him. Kind of like we talked about a little bit ago, he's a little lazy. He doesn't want to walk too far to his other vineyard. So he wants Naboth, so it's right next to his house. And Naboth says no, and he doesn't necessarily do anything about it. He just kind of cries about it. But then his wife takes care of it, which obviously he knew something. Maybe he didn't know she was going to kill him, but obviously he knew she was going to do something, because she tells him she's going to take care of it, and he should have stepped in and said, like, whoa, what are you going to do? But he allows her to do this wicked thing and kill a righteous man for literally just a piece of land, and something that he wanted. And in 2 Kings, if you flip over there to chapter number 9, 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 30. So obviously in this story, if you had time, there's a lot of people that end up dying because of this, but God doesn't kill Ahab because he has like a good heart about it when he's confronted and he's repentant about it. But his wicked wife, she has a bad ending here. In 2 Kings 9:30, it says, "And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out at a window. And when Jehu entered in at the gate, she said, Had Zimri peace, who slew his master? And he lifted up his face at the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? And there looked out at him 2 or 3 eunuchs, and he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trod her underfoot." So we see here that Jezebel, she killed Naboth over this, and God obviously prophesied of the punishment that was going to be laid out between Ahab and his wife Jezebel, but she does something wicked for her husband, and it ends up she gets thrown out of a window. So, she had a bad experience. She had that. She didn't necessarily have the lust, but she just wanted to fulfill her husband's lust. And then, obviously, the sin of killing Naboth, and then the death of her dying. And if you flip over to 2 Kings chapter 10, with this one, you could go through a lot of different people that end up dying because of this one sin for the vineyard. But in 2 Kings chapter 10, verse number 7, it says, "And it came to pass, when the letter came to them, that they took the king's sons and slew 70 persons and put their heads in baskets and sent him unto Jezreel. And there came a messenger and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, Lay them in 2 heaps at the entering of the gate until the morning." So we see here the lust of Ahab wanting this vineyard, the sin of killing Naboth, and then death, which obviously I didn't name them all. You could go through other ones, but, simply Naboth, Jezebel, Jehoram, Ahaziah, and then Ahab's other 70 sons, but then also, all the people that would die in the war. So just because of one little thing, you just have mass death. And obviously, in our life, maybe if we do a sin, it's not going to lead to mass death. But you never know, right? I mean, if one person, like drinking, you didn't drink for a while, you lust after that drink, you go to the bar, you drink, you get in an accident, you could kill who knows how many people. You could kill your family, you could kill whatever, and somebody else could kill you. There's a lot of different examples. Just look at, with who knows with Russia and Ukraine of the true story, but, Putin's lusting over this land, right? The same thing as this, and he goes into Ukraine, and how many people died because of one man's lust for land, power, whatever it may be. So you guys can flip over to Galatians 5. We'll end on that, and I'll read from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6. It says, "Now these things were our examples to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted, neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. So we see here, obviously, not all of it, but this specific story, I'm going to generalize it for all the stories we looked at, but they're all our example, right? The whole Old Testament, all the stories are our example. And it says that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted, which obviously we looked at tons of different stories of lust. And in this specific example, they're committing fornication and doing wicked things. But, just in one day, 23,000 people die. So I think it's good to look at, and obviously you can look at hundreds of examples of people lusting and then the death that ends up because of that. And I think it is good to put a fear in your mind of, hey, in my mind, it's not a big deal to lust after power, fame, money, whatever your specific lust is. But if you find all the examples that you can in the Bible of that lust and then look at the end, read the full story, and get the full picture of, the next generation, the generation after that, usually like that specific lust will go down for years and years and years of sin. And obviously Adam and Eve's sin is still continuing to go on just from one simple lust of that fruit, right? So in Galatians chapter 5, we're going to end on good news of how to not lust. It says in Galatians 5:16, it says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." So obviously the more you walk in the Spirit, the more you read your Bible, go to church, go soul winning, fellowship with people that are like-minded, have good influences in your life, the less likely you are to commit, the big sins, and you're going to stop your lust sooner than later, right? If you're worried, about going to the bar and then you come here and you had that lust in you, you're going to stop it because no one's going to walk with the bar or walk across the street to the bar with you, right? And if you do go there, we're going to drag you back in. So we're going to stop that lust quick. But obviously, the more you're with people that don't do terrible sins, the better off you're going to be. Because obviously, if Ahab didn't have Jezebel, thousands of people probably would have died in these wars, and his sons wouldn't have died, and all types of bad things wouldn't have happened if he would have had good influences around him. And the one good thing about having a good church and good people, and another good thing about the internet, is you can always talk to people, right? If you're struggling with something, there's always somebody you can reach out to, talk to, watch a sermon on, read your Bible. There's tons of stuff you can do to stop it. And we have lots of good friends. And, being in a good movement, there's never a shortage of people you can talk to about something. Whereas like you read the Old Testament, and a lot of times the prophets are like, there's no righteous person, there's no one that's following God, I'm the only one left, and there's a very small remnant. Whereas us, with social media, you can be in some group or some text WhatsApp group or whatever it is, and you can see, hey, there's people I can talk to, people I can associate with, and they can stop me from that. Because if you go out and do a bunch of crazy stuff, we're going to see you online, and we're going to know you're going to be embarrassed. So don't do it. So we're going to close with a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for a great day to be in church today. Thank you for a great building and great people to fellowship with. And please bless everybody as they travel home. And please help us with all the lust we have in our life. And we love you and thank you. And in Jesus' name we pray, amen.